The question is that, well then, did they intentionally deceive? These followers of Jesus get together and wrote the entire story of his resurrection to try to deceive people. Well, let's consider that possibility. Here's what we discover, though. When we consider that might be a possibility, we read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we see that in the stories, the leaders, these guys look really bad. I mean, think of Peter, for example. Peter, who ends up kind of being the leader of the follower of Jesus, is afterwards. When we read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he is always viewed as kind of the fool. He's the one who says dumb things. Jesus says, I'm going to die. And he says, you're never going to die. Stop, Jesus. You're not speaking the truth. He regularly is the one who's the most hard-headed, refuses to believe. Look, if you're going to invent a story to try to promote for self-promotion so you can have money, fame, and power and in charge and try to deceive a lot of people, you're not going to write yourself into the story looking like the fool. You're going to write yourself to look good all the time, and the leaders are not going to own up to this unless that's how it actually happened. Another aspect of that story that just doesn't really work is that the first people, the story goes, if it's a deception, that the first people who saw Jesus alive on Easter were women. And that's great. Until you think of, in their culture at that time, unfortunately, the testimony of a woman was not valid in court or was not considered legal testimony. Nobody was going to take the word of a woman seriously. She just did not have the social power and the rights for that. And so if you're going to devise a story intentionally trying to deceive masses of people, you're not going to write the story where the first eyewitnesses were women. And then when you read the rest of the story, let's just take the 11 remaining disciples, right? We discover that they held on to that deception for the rest of their lives. They traveled abroad telling everyone they met about Jesus. They did not make a lot of money. They were often poor. They were often made fun of. They were often beaten and abused for their belief that Jesus died from the dead. And tradition has it that all of them were killed for their belief in Jesus and his resurrection. Now think about this. Think about this. How likely is it that 11 men followed a teacher who promoted love and compassion? When he died an untimely death, they invented a lie about this teacher, that he was raised from the dead. They made up an entire backstory to make it all his idea all along, one where they look bad in the backstory, and then they all go their separate ways and spend the rest of their lives telling people about the lie, and they all die to maintain the lie, and not one of them owned up to the lie to save their own neck. I guess you could say it's possible. It's really just not plausible. When we weigh the evidence, I'd suggest to you the best conclusion is, I'm sure Jesus lived, died, and rose again. Our belief in the resurrection has a solid, strong foundation, even using reason, logic, history, and science.